Welcome to Plain Talk. Happy to be with you. We are going to be talking with Chief Justice John Jensen of the North Dakota State Supreme Court. And the reason why we're having Justice Jensen on is he is stepping down, not from the court. He is stepping down as Chief Justice. He's had a tenure there where, the court has been undergoing some changes. I mean, there was a lot of weirdness during the pandemic era, which sort of imposed some change on us that maybe we wouldn't have chosen otherwise. But, certainly we saw at the legislature, we saw, at the courts, started doing some things differently. Since being there, I know that Justice Jensen has been an advocate for technological innovation, bringing that in, but now stepping aside and going to let one of his colleagues on the state Supreme Court step up and become Chief Justice. Now, the way that election works is obviously the Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court are elected by the voters, but the Chief Justice on the court is elected by the justices on the court as well as the district court judges around the state. So basically, the judiciary. Chief Justice Jensen, thanks for coming on, first of all.
Thank you for inviting me.
Tell us about your decision not to seek another term as Chief Justice.
Yeah, just very briefly, a couple of things in my personal life. I have an older brother who's always been a role model to me, went to law school before I did, who is experiencing some health challenges. So that was one of the things that was on the back of my mind. And then I had just kind of a freak accident at the beginning of October where I broke 7 ribs. And it just kind of it kind of made me realize that our health can be fleeting. And although I enjoy being the Chief Justice and I like the challenges, I want to maximize some of the time I have with my spouse. My spouse has also kind of been battling a chronic illness for 40 years now. So I want to make sure that whatever time we have together, I maximize that.
Now, are you gonna be just one question? But I swear I'll let Pat ask a question eventually. Are you the terms for the state Supreme Court are 10 years. You were last elected in 2020, so you're halfway through, roughly, your current term. Do you plan on finishing your term in office?
Yeah, I plan on finishing my term. That's my plan right now. That could change, but at least right now, I plan on finishing my term. We could probably have a whole show on whether we should judges should end it at the end of their term or if they should end early and let the governor go
I
through
mean,
the
the reason
appointment.
I asked is because so many of your colleagues, certainly in the past, get appointed. I mean, a lot of times it doesn't seem like. In fact, I think it was Justice Tufte, the last one who ran in a straight up election and not appointed to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I think it was Justice Tufte.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. A lot of it though is just simply timing when folks become eligible for retirement. And at least I will tell you from a Supreme Court perspective, our term runs from September through June. We do hear cases during July and August, but they're limited to either cases that can be brought directly to the Supreme Court or else emergencies. So from a timing standpoint and having a new justice on the court, that August date is really a convenient date. Somebody doesn't have to jump in the middle of a term.
As I recall, you were appointed to your position originally, if I remember correctly, and then you ran for your first and maybe only term. So tell me about that experience. You mentioned before not jumping into the deep water right away. But tell me about, kind of your experience being able to kind of run before you or walk before you run, which would strike me as something that would be helpful because to try and run and then immediately serve would strike me, especially in something as complicated and technical as the Supreme Court. There are, I would think, some advantages to that kind of a process as well, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think the primary advantages have to do with candidates to fill those positions. It's actually relatively new in terms of our state history that there's a lengthy delay. It used to be that it was the next general election that folks that were appointed would have to run. The problem with that is convincing somebody to leave private practice if the general election is 3 months later. So terminate their business, get rid of all their clients, and then potentially face reelection, or not potentially, but face reelection in a relatively short period of time. And if you lose, you're kind of now you're kind of left in that limbo area. You've terminated your practice and you're not sitting on the bench. So I think the rule change was to allow folks who were appointed to sit for at least 2 years. And so if a general election pops up in that initial 2-year period, you don't have to run. But so about the maximum amount of time could be about 3 years.
Well, I was just going to follow up to that. And obviously governors like the opportunity to appoint people to the Supreme Court, but I would also think that that kind of environment, giving them a couple of years, also takes some of the pressure off of just making the decision on who can win, but also giving people an opportunity to demonstrate that they have the chops to do the job well. I would think that not only is it a benefit to attracting good candidates or the process of ingratiating or kind of getting into the job, but it also creates an environment where the candidates, for a lot of different reasons, including the governor appointment, is helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. It's not something I had thought of before, but I think you're right. That's a really good observation.
One thing that I heard from a lot of people when you announced you were running again for Chief Justice was that, like, boy, that was a brief term. And I was thinking about that a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, but are we measuring because his
Yeah,
predecessor was on the court for what was it, 44 years and was the
yeah,
Chief Justice for a significant amount of that time? Obviously we're coming out of the Justice of Van der Waal era, and I guess that maybe skewed our expectations a little bit for
yeah.
staying in that position.
Well, it's people also forget that Chief Justice Erikstead served as Chief Justice for 20 years. So we went through a 50-year period with only 2 Chief Justices. So it's quite lengthy. No, change is healthy, I think. I think it can be a good thing. So
One question. Oh, go ahead, Rob. Your
Well, I was
turn.
going to ask about your time on the court. You really focused on technological innovations. Tell us about some of that. One big one I know was putting all the court records online. And I think we ended up getting the cart in front of the horse a little bit on that one when we found out that maybe great idea. I was 100% for it. The problem is we haven't been doing a great job about
yeah.
taking out some of the private data or maybe curating some of the information that's available online. But talk about some of the other initiatives that you've brought to the court.
Sure. And can I back up a little bit and just put
Sure,
some context on our judicial system? And I'll try to
sure.
be brief. My colleagues, I like statistics, and I bring out these statistics all the time. And sometimes my colleagues get tired of hearing them. But yeah, this is a new audience, right? So our judicial system has somewhere between 160,000 and 180,000 cases each year. And we have 55 district court judges. So if you can think about that, that's a pretty large caseload that each one of our district court judges has to manage each year. A recent study by the National Center for State Courts actually revealed that our district court judges have more felony cases than any other judge in the United States. So again, they're pressed with regard to caseloads. In addition, unlike a lot of states, our judges are judges of general jurisdiction. So we don't have a criminal court judge, a civil court judge, a family court judge, or a juvenile court judge. Every one of our judges has to do every one of those things. So if you can imagine, our judges get up in the morning, they may have family law cases in the morning, criminal cases in the afternoon. It's a lot to ask from them at the district court level. And then we live in North Dakota. There's geographical challenges as well. We have some of our districts that have in excess of a dozen counties. And the judges, we expect our judges to appear in each one of those counties at some time. Everybody in North Dakota deserves to have local court system. And so again, those are three big challenges for our judges: caseloads, the subject matter, the judges of general jurisdiction, but then also just geographical challenges. So, I think technology is one of the ways we can solve that. And so one of the you had mentioned the pandemic, and one of the things that the court tried to do during the pandemic is make sure we kept our doors open. And we were able to do that pretty successfully through what we refer to as reliable electronic means. That's what we're doing now: Zoom hearings, those types of things. And Justice Crothers and Justice Tufte, along with a number of our district court judges, really did a great job in kind of developing a procedure to do that. And that's really carried forward from the from the pandemic forward. And again, we leave each one of our trial judges with discretion on when they want to use it, when it's appropriate. And there are, of course, constitutional limitations. I think it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to hold a criminal trial over Zoom, with the right to confront witnesses and those types of things. But our judges have done a great job of taking the framework that Justice Tufte and Justice Crothers built and using it in ways that are appropriate. So that was one of the things. And another thing that was kind of on my priority list was the court, in my view at least, was inappropriately kind of pulled into the way child support enforcement was being done. The executive branch has a child support enforcement unit. They have attorneys, they have a lot of staff. But somewhere along the line, the court system got into the practice of entering data into their system, but not only entering data, but issuing notices, those types of things. So you can imagine the conflict when someone was disputing the propriety of a notice that the court system itself had generated. So that was, I think, returning that child support notice function back to the executive branch was a good thing. Additionally, we have looked at what's coming up, and I think that's important to take a look at. I noticed you had a note at the beginning of this that AI is going to be used to transcribe. I don't know when perfect transcription by AI is going to take place. Is it going to be 3 years from now? Is it going to be 6?
Yeah.
It's going
It
to
ain't
happen.
perfect now. I do use it. I upload the audio and I use it to
Yeah.
pull the quotes out. But I will tell you, because the nice thing is along with the words, it'll drop me right to where that quote happened. I go back and listen again because it
Yeah.
makes mistakes.
Yeah. Oh, isn't that's a relatively new function, by the way, to be able to hit that transcript and go back to the
Yeah.
audio. We can do that internally in the court system
It's
now.
beautiful. It's very nice.
And that's one of the changes we're looking at is right now the official record is the transcript. But when you think of it, we designated the transcript as the official record back when our court system was dominated by folks that use stenographic machines. We didn't have audio recordings. So the stenographic notes, nobody else could read them. I mean, there was no practical way to make those the official record. But now we record every proceeding. And in fact, we have relatively few people that in fact, in the United States, there are getting to be fewer and fewer that do the stenographic. Instead, everybody records and then makes the transcript from the recording. And as most people will agree, you can't have a transcript taken from a recording that's more accurate than the recording itself. So one of the things we're looking at is making that change to having the digital audio as actually the official recording. Still using the transcripts. We're not going to, a lot of folks prefer to read rather than listen. Nothing wrong with that. But making that, and if you have a question, as you said, just being able to click on that transcript, pull up the audio and hear what was actually said. But you have to, getting back to when is it going to be perfect? I don't know. But that impacts who are you hiring? Are you still going to continue to hire people that are doing transcription? When I think technological event, again, whether it's in 3 years, 5 years, is going to take over that function.
One of the questions I had for you today is obviously the casework, the number of cases you deal with have grown fairly rapidly over the last few years, the last decade, certainly. How did you address that, and how was it that, you were able to manage that? What changes did you make? And how did it go working with the legislature? Because obviously some of this has to be done by, the FTEs you have, the budgets you have, those kinds of things. How did you accomplish maintaining a relatively reasonable, I don't want to call it good because I know a lot of your contemporaries, both in the Supreme Court but also at the district court level, put in a lot of hour to keep up with it. But how are you addressing that, and how have you addressed that?
Sure. And I think there are a number of different things we did. Let's start with the legislature. And I will say that legislature has been a very good partner. We are separate branches of government. It's a little awkward during the legislative session. You've got one branch of government asking for the other branch of government for funding. But they've always been receptive to what our requests are, and think about our requests thoughtfully. We don't always get everything we ask for, but again, I think they've been really good partners. And so looking at the legislature, they have added some FTEs. They've added 3 judgeships. We can't add judgeships without the legislature approving those additional judicial positions. So again, adding the judgeships has helped. Those judgeships were added in our busiest districts. That would be the districts that include Fargo, Bismarck, Grand Forks, are 3 of those districts. Additionally, something else that we've done, and this was through our case flow management committee and how we have cases flow through our system. Judge Robin Schmidt, who is chambered in the Northwest Judicial District. She's done a great job and developed a dashboard that allows our judges to track everything instantly. It also allows the Chief Justice, who's responsible for reviewing docket currency and cases under advisement. I can pull up any individual judge at any time and see what's sitting on their desk and what needs to be decided. And we have some pretty, very specific deadlines for docket currency, which is from the time a case is filed to the time it's decided, that I review. And then additionally, the other thing is cases under advisement. And that's the time that something hits the judge's desk, like a motion, or there's been a bench trial, to the date that it's decided. And we have deadlines for every one of those things. And we can watch those. So that's another thing that has helped out. Also, something that has helped out is just our electronic file management has gotten much better, particularly here at the Supreme Court. It's something that most people don't see, but we have kind of evolved into having electronic transfer of files as rather than moving paper around.
What about the online access to records? We did it for a bit. We shut it off. That's been years now. Is there still a plan to implement that, or is it just going to be too arduous, or what's the update on that?
Yes, it will be implemented. What we're doing currently now is the question is compliance with our court rule that requires you to remove sensitive information or private information. And it's a matter of getting that compliance up to an appropriate rate. One of the problems I think that some people discovered were with regard to traffic citations. That was probably one of the areas where the most identifying information was, because what was happening is those were getting filed into our system just as the ticket, which has a lot of information. So it's a matter of making sure that we don't have that information in our system. And then what we'll do is a look forward. Once we get that compliance rate up to something that is acceptable, and we're not going to get, hopefully we can get close to 100%. And I think with some of the new filing procedures that we're going to start implementing, we will get those up to 100% or darn close. But then we'll have that public access online forward rather than any backward looking.
I will appreciate that as a reporter. I was working on a
Yeah.
story out of Minot about our mayoral election, and I had one was a criminal record in North Dakota, and the other was a criminal record in Florida. And I got to tell you, accessing the Florida record was a lot more fun. And not that and I shouldn't complain. I mean, I've spent years, even before I was a reporter, working at the courthouse staff is almost across the board perfect. They are really great to work with. I've always had good experiences, but the system is the system. So at this point, we have Justice Tufte and Justice McEvers have announced their candidacies for your position. Is that over now? Or could another one emerge, or is that?
Now, the date for putting your name on the ballot has passed. So
And
those
then
are the two
the
kind of.
votes will be counted here in about a month, December 10th.
Yeah, I think that's the date. Yep.
Yeah. Any preference between the two, or do you want to tell us how you
Not
voted?
not gonna. I haven't voted yet. So I can show you my blank ballot.
Okay.
So no, I'm not going to express a preference. I will say this, that I think all of my colleagues on the bench, district court bench, and then at the Supreme Court will think about this thoroughly. But God, we have some challenges coming up. There's technology changes. There's other things, and one of the things that factored into my decision not to run again is this job could be very simple. You can perform as chief the kind of ceremonial duties, and really, if you're not being proactive, it would be a pretty simple job. That's not what I believe the role should be. I think that the chief needs to be a little bit more proactive, needs to be forward looking, which is hard to do. We have lots of judges who have been on the bench for 20 years and they have a few years left and maybe don't want to have change. But that's the role of the chief is to look forward and to make sure that the judicial system and it's going to take some work going forward the next 5-10 years.
I had one question, kind of tangent to what we talked about before, and that was, I'm not usually the guy who's out there championing for, big pay increases for certain categories of state employees. But one of the things, and I've done some candidate recruitment along the way, one of the challenges is that the court system didn't always pay pretty well. And it meant that oftentimes, especially candidates for the Supreme Court, had to have a career before they could actually volunteer their service to come into the sector. Has that improved, or is there more work to be done in terms of making sure? Because obviously in a profession like legal profession, you're going to attract different calibers of talent based on what you can pay. Where are we at in that?
Yeah, I think we've done a great job over the last 5 years increasing pay. I think we can do more. I think judicial pay is competitive with other state pay. But it's not competitive with private practice, or at least for most people in private practice. And for me, it's not necessarily equality. We have lots of great people that are candidates from, for example, another state position, where the pay on the bench is good pay comparative to that. But where I think the pay makes a big difference is in the diversity of our candidates. We may get the same quality, but I think it's helpful to have somebody who's been in private practice on the bench. I think it's helpful to have somebody who's been a prosecutor, somebody who's been a defense attorney. And so that's where I think it's that diversity that I think gets to be lacking when the pay doesn't keep up. At least it's never probably going to reach 100%, but at least competitive to that private practice.
So should we be electing judges, or should they be hired on their vitae, for lack of a better way? I mean, is that where do you see that coming down?
I see two things. One is we live in a populous state. That's the foundation of our state is public elections. You're accountable, right? You're accountable for the decisions you make. The downside of being accountable for the decisions you make is if you have someone sitting on the bench who decides to make decisions based on politics as opposed to based on what the law does. So again, there's the trade-off. But I like the accountability. I think it's good for our system, and I think it's also a testament to how good our trial court judges do, that they're not challenged very often, which means at least the perception is that they're doing a good job.
I wanted to just. I'm sorry.
One thing, and then I'll promise that I'll give it back to you. But along that same line of thought is, you've been really on the term side of the equation. Is there an argument to be made, or is the current system adequate? Should we have termed U.S. Supreme Court justices, just like we do in North Dakota? You have a 10-year term, and I think it should be a longer term. But I mean, which environment do you think creates the best legal environment for either the state or the nation, or should we look to moving past lifetime appointments?
Boy, I think that's the $1 million question. There's positives and negatives, right? If you have the lifetime appointment, theoretically, you're insulated from those from political or public opinion type pressure. On the other hand, as you've indicated, you're not accountable, or as at least I indicated earlier, you're not accountable. So I don't know which one's better. They've both worked well. The federal system has lifetime appointments. I think for the most part that's worked well. And the state, at least North Dakota, has had elections. I think we have a great bench in North Dakota. And I'll get back to statistics just for a second, to let you know how well our district court judges are performing. We have docket currency rates that are at the top of the United States, even though we have really high caseloads. And I was talking about those 160 to 180,000 cases. We actually only see about 300 appeals a year. That means for all of those cases that are going through our district courts, there's only about 300 times where a litigant thinks the judge either didn't treat them fairly or got the law wrong. So again, I think we're doing well in North Dakota with our district court judges.
I wanted to see. We had a debate on the podcast not that long ago between myself, I guess representing the news media perspective, and my good friend Adam Martin from the F5 Project, who I think just does fabulous work overall. But he was successful. He and others were successful in lobbying for a change to access to court records, particularly in criminal proceedings, where if the court reaches a conclusion, like it's an acquittal or a dismissal or something like that, those records become sealed after a certain amount of time. And I understand the logic behind it, because everyone's presumed innocent. Those records can be prejudicial, even if the person wasn't convicted. So the idea is we're going to get them off the record so they're not held accountable for something that we're convicted of. My thinking as a journalist is sometimes the lack an acquittal or a dismissal or something cannot be justice. Sometimes it could be something else, and sometimes the public needs to be able to access these things. And a lot of times we don't know if a court case is important until maybe years after the fact, that we say, oh my gosh, this person was acquitted. Why were they acquitted? Was he somebody's brother-in-law? Was there corruption in place? Was there some sort of bigotry playing a role? We had a debate about that. This is something the legislature did. I mean, do you have a perspective on that, Celia? As somebody, again, who has worked to open up access to these records, do you have a point of view on that?
Yeah, I do, and that is you already hit just at the end of what you were what you were saying, you hit on it. It's the legislature issue. We'll do what the legislature tells us to do. If the legislature wants us to keep records more confidential, we'll do that. If they want us to open up, we'll do that. My feeling though is if they're open, they should be open. The judicial branch shouldn't be the branch that makes determinations. That should be a legislative function. The legislature should tell us. I mean, I strongly believe there are some files that should be closed, files involving juveniles, files involving mental health issues, those types of things.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chief Justice, for being on the show. I certainly appreciate talking to you, and I always enjoy. We had your colleague, Justice Crothers, on last time he was up for election, and I should. This is going to sound bad. I was shocked by the amount of listeners we had. I mean, it was one of our most popular shows. And I thought, oh, we're just talking to some boring justice from the Supreme Court. So I think the public is interested in this, and I think it's a part of our government that people don't pay attention to as much as they should, or at least they don't until there's something sexy happening before the court.
Yeah.
But this touches on so many of our lives. I don't know. It's fascinating to me. Hopefully our listeners found it fascinating as well. Thank you for your time today.
Have a great day.